Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of Velocity Kinetics. Just here, there and everywhere. Not the greatest of days. Been sleeping a bit badly while my hair still looks a bit awful. And, well, there we are. So what is it we're doing today? Aside from trying to work out if I'm using the right setting on the new phone. First video shot with the Samsung. Talking about the changes that F1 made to the rulebook. The new aero rules and things, 2022 changes, have they worked? I have to say an unequivocal yes, and here's why. So we're talking about the changes to the rules in F1 at the moment. Now I'll try and keep this more on topic because on the last video someone said I went on, or not last video, he's commenting on the Swace video and said I went on like a wet blanket. So, honest feedback, I mean, I don't know how much you take, up to a point how much you take the negative feedback into consideration, because it's so easy to be really rude and negative on the internet, but it is something that had to cross my mind. So anyway, try and keep it on point. So obviously we had the rule change for 2022, i.e. this year, it should have come in last year. Done away with a lot of the downforce, we've got ground effect back in, got simpler front wings, simpler rear wings, we've still got DRS, still got the same engine rules at the moment, still got the same parts limitations, we've still got a lot of the same really. So, what is the biggest change? Well, visually, the cars are immensely different in visuals. I mean, if we think about it, the rules we had last year, they created some of the fastest cars we've ever seen with the most grip. I mean, if you ever wanted to know what an F1 car could do at its technological peak, that was a great example. Sorry, if you see me checking my watch, it's because this camera I'm recording can only do 20 minutes at a time on its memory card, so keep an eye on that. So last year's cars were about as technologically advanced as you possibly could. The last set of rules were about as advanced as they could possibly be. So this set of rules, we've got fewer elements on the front wing. We're meant to have the outwash generators on top of the front wheels. We've got simpler rear wings, much more curving flow. They actually look quite nice. No more the barge board weird designs, and simpler rules around the diffuser. And like I said, the biggest change is around the ground effect. Ground effect is not a stranger to Formula 1. It's been around before. 70s, 80s, that's when that really came in, particularly with one of the Lotus chassis. I want to say the Lotus 72, but I could be wrong with that. Certainly it was one of the John Player Special Lotuses. Now, because of all the advances and great understanding we have in aerodynamics since then, it's a case of what do we do from there? As in, how far do you let it go? So we could probably have cars that could well, I mean, they reckon the last lot of cars could have driven upside down given the right run up, but cars that could potentially be so stuck to the ground if we didn't pen in the rules, hem back the rules. Now the cars we've got, ridiculously fast, ridiculously grippy, ridiculously good looking, or at least some of them are. Makes you realise actually how ugly in some ways some of the cars have been over the years, but then how much of that is the paint job, because the AlphaTauri looked good throughout all of it, and most of the Williamses have always looked good as well. So we've got two Venturi tunnels running under the car, which work to basically suck the car to the ground. Little mosquito, not getting bitten. They suck the car to the ground, as the air channels through it, creates a nice low pressure, brings the car down, sits it nice and squat, and then it can go pretty bloody quick, to put it politely. Now, since these rules have come in, and they didn't really know it was going to happen in testing, although you'd have thought they'd looked at the history books to see if it had happened before, is we have something called porpoising. Now, there are plenty of videos talking about what this is. WTF1 have done one. The Race has done one. I'm pretty sure Mark Priestley on his F1 Elvis channel has covered something in relation to this, even if it's just been briefly on Instagram. But they're basically a lot of people far more qualified than myself. But essentially what's happening is the car's getting sucked to the ground, and then gets so low, the air stalls, and then the car pops back up, and then repeats the process again. So then you'll see people sort of headbanging, almost recreating the opening scene to Wayne's World when they put on the Bohemian Rhapsody. Basically, sort of thing. Only about 1,000 times, well, not necessarily, not 1,000 times faster, because that would create an intense brain trauma. But nonetheless, it is something unpleasant, shall we say. They're trying to get on top of it. All teams are trying to get on top of it. Now, the simplest solution is to raise the ride height of the car, which isn't a bad solution, and technologically speaking, especially with the cost cap, because we've now got a cost cap, which I believe this year is $140 million. Oh, Bumblebee. Hello. Nothing more amazing than watching a bumblebee go about his business. Anyway, where was I? Ah, yes. So we've got the cost cap, so obviously teams will want to look at the most cost-effective solutions. Can't just keep bringing out another floor and another floor and another floor and a new diffuser, a new wing. Got to make sure it works, but also they've got limited development time, limited CFD, limited wind tunnel, depending on where you finished in the championship last year. So, the simplest solution to resolve the porpoising is raise the ride height, so when it squashes down, it doesn't go down quite so far, which may on paper create a faster car. Realistically, it means that when you're in the slower corners, the car's a lot higher and you're not getting as much downforce, and then it sort of defeats the object of having the ground effect, because if the car's too high, what is the point? Now, we still have DRS this year, the drag reduction system. It might go away. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's never been left in a pencil. It's never been put in stone, shall we say, that it's going to be there. But it has always been there with the intention of potentially taking it away. And from what I've seen on the racing this year, it might well potentially go away this year. But then again, it creates more overtakes, it gives more opportunities. So whether it will stay or not is another thing altogether. Front wing, we've got fewer flaps. So last year we had loads and loads of elements. I think it was about 5-6 elements, or was it 5 elements we had limited to? 5 elements. So we had 5 elements going up the front wing. Then we had the Y250 area where people try and generate the Y250 vortex, and then try and spin up a vortice under the car and get that to go to the diffuser. We don't have that anymore, although we do have a few different interpretations around where to mount the first element on the first slot gap. Some people have actually mounted it quite low, so they've got an extra element. Some people, well, extra as in, they've sort of made it do 2 jobs, and some cars have got just the maximum amount of elements they're permitted. The cars initially looked very futuristic, but actually now it's like they look kind of more contemporary is probably the best way to put it. Maybe how, in many ways, angular the cars have been over the years. So you could say from the 2009 rule set, in many ways the cars have been incredibly boxy. Boxy front wing, boxy rear wings, and then when they've changed this higher downforce thing, slightly boxy front wing. The only car that I can think of that broke that mould a little bit, actually there's 2 I can think of. Actually, more than 2. It's the McLaren MP4, what was it, 26? 25, 26? When they had the step nose, and actually McLaren made a nice smooth nose, as did the Manor. The only other one I can think of is the Alfa Sauber, where it had the slightly different approach on mounting the elements on the front wing. Still looked a bit boxy, but it was a little less obvious, shall we say. Now, we've also we're back to wheel rim covers rather than exposed. Now, we did obviously have spinners back in the day. 2009 I can think of, and a little bit after that we had them before as well. It's to try and sort of stop any outwash. Basically, outwash is the enemy. So if you think about it, if this is the front end of the car, if I use this boot to demonstrate the front end of the car, if we have outwash, we've got air spinning out this way from the left and the right, creating a massive triangle of disturbed air. And then from there, it makes it harder for the car behind to close up. Now, we're trying to eliminate that. Apparently in testing, and from what I've seen, cars can follow a lot more closely. Not necessarily overtake very easily still, but we don't want it to be too much of a challenge. But it's improved. And you know what this rule set has brought out, which in some ways has been missing in F1 for a long time, in some ways. It's brought about diversity of design. Now, this diversity is not a bad thing. So just checking again, because I'm having to record audio separately. Because of the bad wind, I'm having to record audio separately. It's as for how nice a day it looks, there is an awful lot of wind. But anyway, or at least enough breeze to bother a microphone and make the video unusable. And I don't have a long enough cable for my microphone. And I'm not going to get one, because that's an unnecessary expense that I can't afford at the moment. But anyway, it's brought about, these rule changes have brought about diversity of design. So really, if you think about it, in recent times, last year the only real difference in all the designs, you had Alpine with the big teapot airbox, really. That was the only immediately obviously different piece of design. Everyone had varied on the noses. Some people had kept the wide nose with the small thumb bit at the front. Some had taken a more Mercedes style approach and made a very small, narrow bit with a small mounting point. But everyone sort of was converging on the same idea. Like I said, the Alpine was the only one that was a bit different. Even my beloved Williams was much of a muchness. It was only different because it was a different paint job to what we've seen for years. And even then, there wasn't an awful lot of difference. And you're thinking about it, going back another year, not an awful lot of difference between everyone. And again, and again, and again. The only real cars that had been any different was McLaren with that weird nose. We had like 3 nostrils on it, and then some weird side mounting beams. It was a McRenault, I know that much. Was it the first Sainz and Lando Renault? Might have been. Or it was, I don't think it was the Stoffel and Alonso McLaren. I think it was the, I think it was the first Sainz and Norris. I kept wanting to look for his surname. I kept wanting to say his surname's Lando. It's like, nope, no. It's the first Sainz and Norris McLaren. Again, that is, everything sort of converged. And then you go back to the previous rule set. The anteater noses, everyone again started to converge. You either went down the phallic route or you went down the dignified route, a bit like what the Williams had. They're all... There's not been any real diversity. But if you look at everything now, ignoring the paint job, now I must say, as a lifelong Williams fan and someone who loves their cars and would say they've never really produced an ugly car, I'd have to say that this year they have not produced the best looking car in terms of aesthetics. The last 2 years I'd say that prize would have gone to AlphaTauri. This year I would have to say it's the Scarlet car. It is Ferrari that have got it right in terms of the paint job. Even the McLaren also does look okay with the Google sponsoring. The Red Bull always looks fairly tidy, and again the AlphaTauri looks good, but I'd say the Ferrari hands down. But if you think about it, you've got the Ferrari with its narrow nose and not fairly conventional side pods. The Mercedes powered cars have got, let me think, you've got Mercedes, you've got McLaren, you've got Aston, you've got Williams, all different takes on the side pods. You've got Mercedes with their virtually non-existent side pods at the moment, which may well disappear. They may go back to conventional ones to try and control the porpoising, if they think that is where the problem's coming from. But yeah, what different design approaches? You've got the Aston with quite wide side pods, and lots of cooling slats. You've got the Mercedes on the other end of the spectrum with very narrow. You've got the Williams and the McLaren, sort of a halfway house. You've got various people with different cooling slats running over the side pods and sort of being part of the structure to help the venting. The Ferrari is particularly good at that. You've got the contouring again with the slats in it as well. It's an amazing amount of diversity that we've not seen. Then you've got people going extreme with the side pods. So you had the AlphaTauri and the Red Bull having quite small side pods. They would be fairly convergent because of both running now Red Bull powertrains, but both running Honda power. So they would be fairly similar. But yeah, very very interesting to say the least. Seeing we've got different approaches. The Red Bull had quite an extreme undercut on the side pods. The Aston didn't really have the most extreme of undercuts. The Alpha actually looks pretty good this year. Actually, that's an interesting one to watch for development. But the other added thing in all this, I need to move away from the design side of things. It's the cost cap. as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. So we've got the cost cap. And the interesting thing about what that's going to have, as I mentioned, you can't just bring out a new part after part after part. Not only does it mean that the smaller teams like Haas, the Williams, I'd probably even maybe class Alfa, Alpine and AlphaTauri within that same bracket as well. They haven't got the limitless sources of money to produce 4 different front wings and test all 4 of them over the weekend. Go, well, actually, that one, we'll reserve that one for Monza. We'll keep this one for there, keep that one for there. They've got to produce what they're going to use. I've got 4 minutes to wrap up. This is going to be quite tough. But anyway, you got that sort of controlling how everything does. So basically, everyone is bringing parts that they are certain are the best possible parts for the car as they turn up, and actually go into production. So it means better use of their time in CFD, better use of their time in the wind tunnel. It's an interesting extra element, because you can't just produce a one-off piece necessarily, or you've got to really justify we're going to bring a one-off upgrade for Belgium, for example. Like, okay, so it's going to cost us X million, and we're just going to use it for Belgium. It's got to be everything you produce has got to be an all-rounder. And you've got that added element to it, and then obviously all the crash damage becomes part of that. Where does the cut-off come? Where do people start saying, look, we're going to stop crashing, you're costing us loads of money? And I appreciate that would probably be directed in Aston Martin's direction at the moment, more so than most. Yeah, just what an odd set of circumstances to find ourselves in. I've just restarted the camera because I thought, you know what, there's a lot of stuff to talk about and can't get it done in 20 minutes. So anyway, yeah, we've got everything with the budget cap and the limiting to crash damage. We've also had, quite interesting at the start of the year, we had the whole Haas debacle. Now, not as in Haas was the problem, but related to their driver, to Mazepin. I paid my way in. Obviously, what happened in the Ukraine and Russia going in. A lot of Russian athletes are now banned from competing, and they can compete under neutral flags, but they also have to sign something to say that I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was someone, I can't remember which driver it was, they weren't willing to sign. I want to say it was Kvyat, which has put a damper on his LMP2 debut. But then Haas obviously had to remove all the Uralkali sponsorship off the car, and then find a new driver. And then you had Kevin Magnussen parachuted right back into it all, and then getting decent points in the first two races. Nothing in Australia, but if you think about it, I think who did the stat? Was it WDF? Someone on WTF1? I want to say it was on their podcast when I was listening to it. That whoever it is has worked out that Haas have actually scored more points in 2 races than they have done in the preceding 28 races or something daft like that. No, not 28. 30 something actually. It was like in previous season and a half, if not more. They scored far more points. It's insane. We've not got any real rookies on the grid this year. The only rookie we've got is Zhou Guanyu, the Alfa Romeo driver. I'm interested to see how Bottas gets along in the Alfa Romeo this year. So far he's been doing a damn good job, and it looks like being out the spotlight is working for him. Doing a bit like what going back to AlphaTauri did for Pierre Gasly. Not that Bottas was in too much of a problem, but being in the relentless competing machine that the Mercedes outfit is, just insane, really. And the man deserves a break. He deserves time to himself, and time out the spotlight, and time away from people questioning his motives and whether he's willing to keep racing. Let's say it isn't fair. We've got Alonso still, obviously at Alpine. I know there was talk potentially he might jack it in, but I don't know why. People thought that because he's signed a contract and talking about potentially extending it again. You've got the likes of Norris signing a long-term contract. You've got Leclerc still under contract. Sainz talking about renewal at Ferrari. Sainz is struggling so far at the moment at Ferrari, whether Leclerc just... It's like many things. I think this set of rules just gels with Leclerc so far. And I've got to say, as someone who for years absolutely hated Ferrari, but I think, like a lot of people, I hated Ferrari because Schumacher was there, and not anything against Schumacher, because he had the best car on the grid and an immense amount of talent. He wasn't, what's he going to do, crash it every weekend? But I think I'd gotten fed up with seeing him win all the time, much like with the Red Bull. It was great to see them win for a bit, then when they were winning everything, I got fed up. When Mercedes started winning, great to see Rosberg, great to see Hamilton winning, but then with the relentless, and Bottas as well, but then with the relentless, I don't know how you can't even think of the words to describe, but the relentless slaughter, shall we say, that Mercedes have presented, even the occasional Bottas win started to get like, yay, it's Bottas, but it's still a Mercedes win. I'm actually liking the fact Ferrari are winning at the moment. It's very, very good, and it's really refreshing to see Ferrari. Well, actually, no, I'd say actually, yeah, I'd say it. So, it's refreshing to see them being like really conservative. Like, look, we're not going to say we're the best. We're not going to say this. We're not going to say that. We're just doing what we can and making hay whilst the sun shines, which is exactly what they should do, because it just takes one misjudgment, one engine failure, and boom, that's it. I mean, as you can see, we've got Max Verstappen having retired out of 2 races. He's retired out of 2/3 of the races he's entered, shall we say. And Perez is retired in 1/3 of the races that have been entered so far this year. You know, it can easily swing one way or the other, but if all the mechanical problems are on Verstappen's side of the garage at Red Bull, for example, you're then going to find yourselves in an awkward position where they might have to start backing Checo for their championship bid. And to be fair, I don't think that's a bad thing for them to back Checo, because when Checo came in, he was highly rated Ferrari junior driver, and yeah, the McLaren, it's been interesting how they've gone from once being superb in testing to being struggling as much as they are. It was initially because of brake cooling, and then they've sort of Frankensteined something together on the car. Had a far better Australia than they'd expected. We've got Albon back in the Williams. Williams have got a point on the board already, just a point, but it's still more than Aston Martin. Don't know whether that trend will continue. We've had Latifi crash out quite a few times. Granted, I'd say the one with Stroll was more Stroll's fault than Latifi's. I think Latifi did a stupid thing to pull over to let Stroll through and then try and repass him, but Stroll was ultimately the one at fault, in my opinion. You've got interesting things running up and down the grid. We even had Vettel, who had tested positive for COVID and missed the first 2 races. Hülkenberg step in. Now, what can he do, knowing how that Aston Martin drives? What can he do in the simulator? How can he help the team? Well, can Aston Martin even start their upward climb up the grid? Become the competitors that they want to become? You know, it is this season we got such a myriad of possibilities, and we've got, barring any dissolving of, well, furthering of various crises and things happening far worse than anyone had intended, and barring COVID having another resurgence and taking events off the calendar, we've got 23 race calendar this year. So the championship could either be done dead early if one team's got it dead right, and to be fair, if one team's got it dead right, there's no point in getting sour or anything over it. If Ferrari have nailed it, then they have nailed it. But we've also got more races than we've ever anticipated before. We've got more opportunities. We've got better chance at the moment, whilst they're still understanding these rules, for more upside down races, which I always like. Realistically, I think it's going to be much of a muchness, but we've got that possibility. I mean, and as we are I haven't admittedly watched the first 3 races because I've had work and had to take Sarah to work and from work and just not had the time. But from watching the highlights and what reruns I've been able to sit through, it's a far better spectacle so far than F1's had in a long time. And Charles Leclerc being on the top step of the podium, whilst it's been 2 out of 3 times he's been on top step of the podium, I think a lot more people are happy to see him on the top step of the podium. I think out of the last few years where it's basically been Hamilton versus Verstappen for the most part, I'd say most people are fairly cool towards Leclerc. Aside from if you're a fanboy, not passionate, not a fanboy. Just we need to embrace this season. We're gonna bloody enjoy it, and I really need to make more time to be able to watch it. But time and life keep getting in the way at the moment, shall we say? But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there because I will find more things to go on and on and on about if I'm not careful. So, spectacle is amazing. We've got amazing diversity of design, got beautiful looking cars, or at least in my opinion, beautiful looking cars. We've got them going at insane speeds, and when they go on top of the porpoising and unlock more performance, we might see them go even faster than we have done the previous 2 years. We've got the opportunity for an old great to get back on the top of the podium, back on top of the championship, Ferrari. We've got opportunities for midfield teams to move forwards, like Alfa with Bottas. We've got opportunities for other teams to sort of find themselves, like Williams, and we can potentially see old names slip back down the grid. McLaren had an amazing trajectory until they put the Mercedes engine in the back of their car again. And unfortunately, that also coincided with the signing of Danny Rick, and they slumped a bit, and then they've slumped a lot again. So does that mean they've got to start all that progress again, or can they just do it? Who knows? I know one thing though, it's going to be bloody amazing to see. So, recording this on Saturday before Easter, so happy Easter when this goes out. I'm hoping to get this all edited and things today and get it out on Easter Day, which doesn't leave me a lot of time, but should be alright. So yeah, happy Easter, or just have a good day wherever you are, whenever you do eventually watch this. Please like the Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you can, spare a couple of pounds, donate to us via paypal.me/velocitykinetics. And we'll see you in the next video.